behalf of the National Park Service at the Carter G. Woodson Home National Historic Site, I welcome you as we celebrate the birthday of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Dr. Woodson launched a national movement to promote social justice and pride through an appreciation of Black history that has grown into our nation's honoring Black History Month. Born on this day 145 years ago in New Canton, Virginia, Dr. Woodson's life is one to be greatly admired and respected. During his life, he was a coal miner, world traveler, linguist, editor, publisher, businessman, historian, teacher, mentor, and scholar. Of all his contributions, his greatest was the institutionalizing of Black history. The historical works he researched and wrote preserved countless stories of Black achievement, ranging from social, military, religious, and political history. He mentored an entire generation of Black scholars and founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, known today as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, or ASALH. Over the past decade, we in the National Park Service have worked together with ASALH to tell his history at the Carter G. Woodson Home National Historic Site. Despite a national pandemic, we've made progress, holding our planning meetings virtually and using our 21st century technology to tell Dr. Woodson's 20th century story. This year, we completed the architectural design for the site's 2 adjacent row homes, which will become a visitor center welcome area, house permanent exhibits, as well as the offices for the National Park Service and ASALH. Once again, ASALH will have an office on 9th Street. Since last year, we've made substantial progress on the final design of the new exhibits. This involves selecting meaningful stories to share about Dr. Woodson, designing the exhibits, and identifying topics for the site's orientation film. Recognizing Dr. Woodson's legacy continues. The site will host an enhanced media program that will explore people who were inspired by Dr. Woodson's legacy and the continued work of ASALH. We are excited about the progress made in our collaboration with ASALH. The Woodson Committee's sustained engagement is an example of Dr. Woodson's legacy and the impact of ASALH. Thank you again for joining us today, and we hope that you are able to visit the Carter G. Woodson Home National Historic Site in the summer of 2022, when we plan to reopen the full 3-row home site with permanent exhibits. Just as Dr. Woodson is a pillar of African American history, so will the Carter G. Woodson Home National Historic Site be a pillar and landmark in Washington, D.C.
Hello, my name is Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham. I am the National President of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, ASALH, as we call ourselves. I bring greetings to you in recognition of the birthday of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who founded ASALH in 1915, 105 years ago, and thereby began the Black history movement that changed the course of American history. Now, perhaps you are wondering what I mean when I say that Woodson changed the course of American history. That is a tall order, but indeed he did so in 2 ways. First, in an academic way. Woodson's efforts through the association he founded led to a fuller and truer American story because he brought about the rewriting of the American past to include the contributions of persons of African descent. And this is why Woodson is known today as the father of Black history. Woodson served as a role model and a mentor for younger Black scholars. He made opportunities of publishing, conference attending, and professional opportunities for Black and white historians who would expand and correct our understanding of our nation's past. As a professor and former chair of Harvard's History Department, I can say with certainty that courses and books on American history today look nothing like the courses and books that Woodson encountered when he received his PhD from the Harvard History Department in 1912. As far as the college curriculum was concerned in his day, Black people had no history considered worth teaching or learning. Woodson rejected the omissions and lies by sustaining a fact-driven movement to refute the kind of American history course that he was taught, the kind of course that explicitly disparaged Black men and women by referring to them as inferior and as having no achievements, the kind of course with lessons that served to sanction racial discrimination. Carter G. Woodson's tireless research and publications over the decades steadily grew in and beyond academia. He launched Negro History Week in 1926 and reached out especially to teachers and administrators in Black K through 12 schools. His impact continued to grow throughout local communities such that Black history appears today, not only in schools and textbooks, but in museums and national parks, and in television documentaries, and in the nationwide celebration of Black History Month in February. So please go to asalh.org, asalh.org, and see the wonderful events that will occur in our virtual Black History Month Festival throughout February on the theme of the Black family, the Black History theme for 2021. But Woodson also changed the course of American history in another way. He believed that historical scholarship was crucial to the struggle for racial equality in America. The great historian John Hope Franklin described Woodson's work as, and I quote him, a valiant attempt to force America to keep faith with herself, to remind her that truth is more praiseworthy than power, and that justice and equality, long the stated policy of this nation, should apply to all its citizens, and even to the writing of history, unquote. Well, like John Hope Franklin, I too believe that Woodson changed the course of American history because of his belief in and commitment to the transformative power of knowledge to inspire Black people with self-pride and to instill in us knowledge of our civil and political rights. In fact, he empowered Black people with an arsenal of knowledge, an arsenal of scholarship that provided the weaponry to demand the end to Jim Crow segregation and voter disfranchisement, the realities that were mandated by law during Woodson's lifetime. But I submit to you that this belief in the transformative power of history, in the quest for social justice, is as much needed today as it was in Woodson's day. Perhaps it was the great leader and first woman president of ASALH, Mary McLeod Bethune, who captured best the role of Woodson in the quest for racial equality when she asserted at the time of his death in 1950, and I quote her, "I shall always believe in Carter G. Woodson. He helped me to maintain faith in myself. He gave me renewed confidence in the capacity of my race for development and in the capacity of my country for justice for her own people and for all peoples. So let us therefore remember and celebrate this great man on the day of his birth." Thank you.
And the 41st and current Grand Basileus of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, I bring you greetings on behalf of almost 200,000 initiated men in 750 chapters and in 15 countries. I am so excited to come here to talk about my fraternity brother, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and wish him a happy birthday on this birthday occasion. Dr. Carter G. Woodson is so important to the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. He became a member of our fraternity in 1917. But one of the things that a lot of people don't recognize is that what came out of Negro History Week is a program that we celebrate in the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity every chapter, every year, and it's called Achievement Week. This is an important week to our fraternity because we celebrate and we honor citizens that have been impactful in their communities. We honor our brothers that have excelled in social action, mandated programming. This is a week where we celebrate each other and celebrate the accomplishments we have attained and how we've been impactful in our communities. And this was born from that particular week, from Carter G. Woodson. It was inspired, excuse me, by him. And so we're excited about these kinds of celebrations where we can join together with the world to celebrate this giant that's been so big in the world of African American history and just in the history of Africans all across the world. Again, those 750 chapters that I mentioned celebrated. In fact, we just got through celebrating our Achievement Week programs the week of November 17th. That is inspired by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. So Omegas all over the world ask you to join us as we approach the end of this year and approach 2021, because next year we'll be celebrating a Black History theme, which is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. And Omegas all over the world will join you in celebrating this theme. Thank you so much.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies resound the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. March on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, turn the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn has died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place from which our fathers died. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the This is our God where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk of the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our God, true to our God, true to our native land, true to our native
Did you know that the ancient Egyptian was full-blooded Negro? Our children should know the scientific genius of the ancient Egyptian. They should know the courageous genius of Harriet Tubman. They should know the athletic genius of the great heavyweight champion Jack Johnson. They should know the poetic genius of Langston Hughes. These human beings were full of genius. The Christmas tree is like the human being. When the human being is lit up with knowledge, the human being is able to bring great gifts to the world. I love this time of year, not for my sake, but for the sake of the children. I take white tissue paper and red ribbons and wrap up books so that they might get the gift of knowledge, learn their history, light up the world with their brilliance. Do not wait until the last moment to prepare for Negro History Week. The time is at hand. I look forward to the day when Negro History Week will become Negro History Year. Our history should be a part of American history. Our history should be in every educational system around the world. Secure the necessary literature at once and begin to plan immediately. Demonstrate to the community what you and your co-workers have learned about Negro history during the year. The time is now, but you must be willing to sacrifice. You may be asking yourself, Dr. Woodson, why are you so passionate about Negro history? My professor at Harvard once told me that the Negro had no history and that the Negro had not made a respectable contribution to the world. Question: how is it that you can rise to the heights of being a professor at Harvard and not know the history of the Negro? What this professor did not know was that I had already traveled around the world and had learned there was a great deal of Negro history everywhere. I told him there was plenty of Negro history. He looked at me with stern eyes, lifted his chin up angrily, and before slamming the door, told me to prove it. I knew in that moment I was a lamb in the midst of a wolf. And if the lamb continues to go to the table of the wolf for history, if the lamb continues to go to the table of the wolf for knowledge, if the lamb continues to go to the table of the wolf for self-worth, freedom, justice, and equality, the result will always be the same. The lamb will end up at the table of the wolf as lamb chops. I was determined in that moment to teach Negro history. Every child, every Negro should know Negro history and the greatness of it. If a nation has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition, it becomes a negligible factor in the world and stands in danger of being exterminated. In this great millennium, the achievements of the Negro properly set forth will crown him a factor in early human progress and a maker of civilization. Let truth destroy the dividing prejudices of nationality and teach universal love, regardless of race, merit, or rank. I am devoted to this mission, but I pay for it. In this great time of war, the organization has suffered. I've suffered in other ways as well. How many of you out there are married? Have children? Grandchildren? I have had several long-term romantic relationships thanks to my dear and beloved friend, Miss Mary McLeod Bethune, who has not only given me the idea of the Negro History Bulletin, but has taken upon herself of hooking me up with eligible bachelorettes. She is my dear and beloved friend. People have often asked me, why do I allow for her to call me Carter? My answer, I do not allow for her to call me anything. She is the first lady of the struggle. When a woman of that kind of character speaks, all is silent. When a woman of that kind of character walks through a door, all eyes rush to her. When a woman of that kind of character walks into a room, she fills up the whole room with her presence. She speaks the same language as I do, the language of education, the language of sacrifice, the language of Negro history. Her ability to organize and see her vision for a grand university come forth, her commitment to Negro excellence has made me a better man. So she can call me Carter, but it is Dr. Woodson to you. I am a bachelor. I have been this way throughout my career because I am wedded only to this work. I have never married because if I have done so, my wife would be without a husband. I had to take the vow of celibacy. When I began the work of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History in 1915, I knew I would be in for a hard struggle. We ran into so many difficulties, unexpected difficulties. I had to take the vow of celibacy. With just a little money for myself, just a few dollars a week, I would give some of it to my sister, and the rest I would put back into the work. To have been married under such circumstances would be out of the question. Some of our modern women spend more money on themselves than this in a moment's time with drinks, cigarettes, and getting their hair done. You should know enough about me to know that I am the hungriest man in the United States. I once drove a garbage wagon and toured as a miner for 6 years in my hometown. Many were the days when my mother knew where she would find her breakfast in the morning, but did not know where she would find her dinner at night. Many were the days when I had to retire early on a Saturday night so that she could wash my clothes and I would have something clean to wear on Sunday morning. From my father, I learned better. He had been a field slave and could neither read nor write, yet became the greatest factor in my education. This former slave once told me, "Son, you do not have to wait till you die to lose your soul, son. Son, Whenever you degrade yourself to appease any man, mislead your people, you have already lost your soul, son. Son, do not carry any man's horse and grant him help. Do not dust off his hat with one hand and hold out the other for a tip. Do not shine his shoes to gain his smile, or clean his clothes to gain a favor, or clean his kitchen in order to sit at his table. I used to do all these things when I was a slave, son. And if you continue to do them, you are not a free man. And you cannot look him in the eye and tell him, sir, I am your equal. Neither you nor he will believe it. Even though we were poor, my father never hired me out to work for anyone, never allowed me to wear any hand-me-down clothing, and never allowed me to walk through any man's back door. I have been responsible for the education of black, brown, yellow, and white races in both hemispheres. I have studied the educational systems in America as well as Europe. I've written numerous books, book reviews, and essays on African history and culture, especially for children. I have high hopes for Negro history. I have set up certain agencies and systems in order to educate. I do not agree with the once popular view that these poor people do not pay large taxes and should be reliant upon charitable contributions to their uplift. It is my belief that the consumer pays tax and should be given unlimited opportunity to develop themselves. In studying the education system in Europe and America, I have learned that it does not hit the mark, even as it relates to the needs of the white man himself. But if the white man wants to go along with it, let him do so. But so far as the Negro is concerned, if he wants to develop his own educational system, let him do so. But the American educational system, with all of its defects, however, does so much more for the needs of the white man than it does for the Negro, because it conforms to the needs of the white man and it does not conform to the needs of those who have been former slaves, for instance. The philosophy and ethics of the American educational system justifies slavery, segregation, and says the oppressor has the right to exploit and kill the oppressed Negro. The Negro's mind has come under the control of his oppressor. And when you control a man's thinking, you could control his actions. You do not have to tell him to stand here or go yonder. He will do so without being told. You do not have to tell him to go through the back door. He will go through without being told. And if there is no back door, he will find a wall, cut one out, and walk right through it. This educational system inspires and affirms the oppressor that he is everything and has created everything, while at the same time crushes the divine spark within the Negro and tells him he is nothing, his race is nothing, and he's become a hopeless liability to the human race. It is no wonder that the lovers of freedom and promoters of truth do not stand up against this present propaganda being promoted in the classroom. This is the worst kind of lynching. And there would be no lynching if it did not start in the classroom. This is the reason why I teach Negro history, to fight against this false teaching that is so dangerous. This holiday season, I love to gather children around my front porch and tell them stories. I tell them African stories, Southern folklore stories. I would even tell them stories of James Weldon Johnson, the writer of the Black National Anthem. He wrote a poem called The Creation. And God stepped out on space. And God looked around and he said, I'm lonely. I'll make me a world. And as far as the eye of God could see, darkness covered everything. Blacker than 100 midnights down in a cypress swamp. Then God smiled, and the light broke, and the darkness rolled up on one side, and the light stood shining on the other, and God said, that's good. Then God reached out and he took the light in his hands and he rolled the light around in his hands until he made the sun. And he set that sun blazing in the heavens. And with the light that was left from making the sun, he gathered it up, a shining ball, and flung it against the darkness, spangling the night with the moon and the stars. Then down between the darkness and the light, he hurled the world and said, that's good. Then God himself stepped down. And the sun was on his right hand, and the moon was on his left, and the stars were clustered about his head, and the earth was under his feet, and God walked. And where he trod, his footsteps hollowed the valleys out and bulged the mountains up. Then God stopped and he looked and he saw that the earth was hot and barren. So he stepped over to the edge of the world and he spat out the 7 seas. He batted his eyes and the lightning flashed. He clapped his hands and the thunders rolled. The waters above the earth came down. The cooling waters came down, and then the green grass sprouted and the little red flowers blossomed. The pine tree pointed his finger to the sky, and the oak spread his arms, and the lakes cuddled down into the hollows of the ground, and the rivers ran down to the sea, and God smiled again, and the rainbow appeared and curled itself around God's shoulders. Then God raised his arms and waved his hands over the seas and over the lands, and he said, bring forth, bring forth. And quicker than God could drop his hands, fishes and fowls and beasts and birds swam the seas and the rivers, roamed the forest and the woods, and split the air with their wings. And God said, that's good. Then God walked around and God looked around on all that he had made. He looked at the sun. He looked at the moon. He looked at the stars. He looked on his world with all its living things and said, I'm lonely still. Then God sat down on the side of a hill where he could think. By a deep, wide river, he sat down with his head in his hands, and God thought. And he thought till he thought. I'll make me a man. Up from the bed of the river, he scooped the clay. And by the bank of the river, he kneeled him down. And there, the great God Almighty who lit the sun and fixed it in the sky, who flung the stars to the most far corner of the night, who rounded the earth in the middle of his hands. This great God, like the mammy bending over her baby, kneeled down in the dust, toiling over a lump of clay till he shaped it in his own image, and then into it blew the breath of life. And man became a living soul. Amen. Amen. The Christmas tree reminds me of the human being. When the human being is lit up with the light of knowledge, the human being is able to bring great gifts to the world. The gift you can give me during this holiday season is knowing your history, knowing your culture, and most of all, knowing yourself. Then you can light up the world with your brilliance. I do not agree with W.E.B. and the talented tenth. Why does talent have to be tithed? And if you're going to give your talent away, shouldn't it be 90 rather than 10? I believe 100. Then perhaps we will create a great civilization again. But you must be willing to sacrifice.